The haunting of Borley Rectory, known as the most haunted house in England. Borley Rectory was the site of numerous paranormal occurrences, including ghostly apparitions and mysterious footsteps. Its chilling reputation has been woven into the tapestry of the village's history. Our first story begins with the arrival of the Willoughby family, who, unaware of the rectory's dark history, move into the grand but dilapidated mansion, which tests the very boundaries of their sanity. Nestled in the heart of the quaint village of Borley, with its cobblestone streets and centuries-old cottages, stood the ominous silhouette of Borley Rectory. An imposing Victorian mansion, it dominated the landscape like a shadow from a forgotten nightmare. This once grand house had long held the reputation of being the most haunted house in England. It was a gloomy afternoon when the Willoughby family arrived in Borley. Samuel Willoughby, a successful barrister from London, had been drawn to the village by the rectory's history of being available at an astonishingly low rent. Samuel, his wife Eleanor, and their 2 children, Lydia and William, were entirely unaware of the dark secrets that lay within the crumbling walls of the old rectory. The villagers watched with a mix of apprehension and curiosity as the Willoughbys stepped into the massive, decaying structure. They knew the rectory's history all too well, a tale of ghostly apparitions and mysterious footsteps that had plagued the house for generations. The whispered rumours spoke of a vengeful nun and ghostly echoes of a long-dead choir. But the Willoughbys were sceptics, dismissing these stories as mere superstition. Inside the rectory, the family began to settle into their new home. The grandeur of the mansion, though faded and tarnished, was still evident. Ornate wallpaper, peeling and faded with age, lined the walls, and grand chandeliers hung from the ceilings, their crystal prisms dulled by time. The wooden floors creaked beneath their footsteps, and the air was heavy with the scent of dampness and neglect. Eleanor, a practical and level-headed woman, couldn't help but sense an unease in the house. She often found herself lingering near the disused chapel, a room that seemed to hold a peculiar and unsettling energy. As she passed its entrance, she felt a sudden chill, as if an unseen presence reached out to her. One moonlit night, as she ventured into the chapel, she witnessed something that sent shivers down her spine. In the dim light, a ghostly figure materialized before her, clad in the tattered robes of a nun. Her face was pale, her eyes empty and mournful, and her spectral presence exuded an otherworldly coldness. The nun's lips moved silently, forming words that remained unheard, yet her gaze spoke of sorrow and a longing for something beyond the grave. Eleanor stumbled backwards, her heart racing, and as quickly as the apparition had appeared, it dissolved into the night. She rushed to her husband, Samuel, breathless and trembling, but despite her husband's comforting words, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling of the nun's eyes piercing her soul. In the days that followed, she began to research the history of Borley Rectory, uncovering the tragic tale of the nun who had been walled up alive. The presence of the ghostly nun was but the beginning, and the rectory's dark history was slowly but surely creeping into the Willoughby family's lives, casting a long and menacing shadow over their new home. Little did they know that the secrets of Borley Rectory would test their sanity and pit their scepticism against a malevolence that defied explanation. The spectre of the nun continued to haunt Eleanor's dreams, her eyes hollow and mournful, her whispers a wordless lament that echoed through the corridors of Borley Rectory. Each night, Eleanor's sleep was disrupted by the chilling presence of the apparition, and each time she awoke, she found herself drenched in a cold sweat. During the day, Eleanor became increasingly obsessed and spent hours poring over old books and dusty manuscripts in search of any clues that might shed light on the nuns' tragic history. The villagers, who had initially welcomed the Willoughbys, grew increasingly distant, their faces etched with concern as they watched Eleanor's descent into the chilling legend of the rectory. One stormy night, as the wind howled outside and rain beat against the windows, Eleanor ventured into the chapel alone, a flickering candle her only source of light. The room was colder than the rest of the house, and the air seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. As she stood before the decaying altar, she sensed a presence behind her, a presence she felt before. Turning slowly, Eleanor saw the ghostly nun once again, her figure bathed in the soft glow of the candle's flame. The nun's pale face was contorted in an expression of sorrow, and her spectral eyes seemed to plead for something that lay beyond the grave. Her lips moved soundlessly, but this time Eleanor could almost make out the words. "Forgive me," the nun mouthed, her voice a mere whisper, like the rustling of leaves in a desolate graveyard. Eleanor's heart ached with empathy for her tortured soul. The nun's presence was no longer a source of terror. It had become a poignant reminder of an injustice that had endured for centuries. Eleanor's research into the rectory's history began to yield more information about the nun's tragic fate. Walled up alive within the chapel as an act of penance for her sins. The villagers had believed that her tormented spirit would be forever imprisoned within the chapel's walls. As Eleanor delved deeper into the nun's story, she became increasingly determined to help the spirit find peace. She couldn't ignore the nun's heartfelt plea for forgiveness any longer. She confided in Samuel, who, though initially skeptical, could see the toll the haunting had taken on his wife. Together, they resolved to uncover the truth about the nun and, if possible, help her find the redemption she sought. The village held a wealth of secrets, and as Eleanor and Samuel delved deeper into the history of the rectory, they unwittingly stirred the restless spirits, setting in motion a series of events that would push the boundaries of their understanding and courage. The haunting of Borley Rectory was far from over, and the nun's lament was just the beginning of a chilling journey into the unknown. The first sign of the rectory's malevolent influence was mysterious footsteps that echoed through the corridors at night. The Willoughbys, accustomed to the sounds of an old house settling, soon realised that these were different, purposeful, deliberate, and seemingly directed at them. Doors, long unused and swollen with dampness, creaked open of their own accord, revealing empty rooms. The Willoughbys' attempts to secure these doors with heavy furniture proved futile, as they would find them wide open the following morning. It was as if the house itself had a mind of its own, a sinister intention guiding its actions. The malevolent apparition of the priest began to manifest itself with increasing frequency. Samuel, ever the skeptic, could no longer deny the existence of the supernatural. The priest, a sinister figure with a face obscured in darkness, would appear at the foot of the Willoughbys' bed, a silent but ominous presence that sent a shiver down their spines. As the manifestations intensified, the Willoughbys found themselves increasingly isolated from the villagers. The once friendly neighbours now regarded the rectory with fear and superstition, refusing to step foot on the property. The family was left to face the terrifying phenomena alone, with no one to turn to for support. Desperate for answers, the Willoughbys reached out to paranormal investigators who specialised in the supernatural. A team of investigators arrived, armed with an array of equipment, including electromagnetic detectors, infrared cameras, and audio recording devices. They were determined to document the hauntings and provide some form of explanation for the strange occurrences that plagued the family. During their investigation, the team captured chilling evidence of the supernatural. Electronic voice phenomena revealed disturbing messages seemingly whispered from the beyond. These unearthly voices seemed to be the tortured souls of the nun and the priest, their pleas for justice and release, chilling the investigators to their core. As the investigators dug deeper into the history of Borley Rectory, they uncovered a sinister cult that had once thrived in the village. The cult's dark rituals were intricately tied to the hauntings of the rectory. The village had a history of secrecy, and it seemed that the malevolent forces were determined to protect the terrible truth that had remained hidden for centuries. The Willoughbys, driven to the brink of terror, had no choice but to confront the malevolent entities. While the rectory itself seemed to conspire against them, its walls whispering secrets that defied explanation. They would be forced to confront their deepest fears and the malevolent forces that had been unleashed. Only then could they hope to free Borley Rectory from its eternal torment, or risk becoming a part of its haunting legacy. The arrival of the paranormal investigators marked a turning point in the Willoughbys' eerie ordeal. As the team ventured into the chapel, where Eleanor had first encountered the ghostly nun, their detectors began to emit erratic readings. The air grew icy cold, and a pervasive feeling of unease settled over them. The investigators were experienced in the paranormal, but the intensity of Borley Rectory's malevolence was unlike anything they had encountered before. The EVP sessions also yielded chilling results. Whispered voices seemed to echo from the very walls of the chapel, speaking in archaic language and imploring for release from torment. The voices were mournful and desperate, sending shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. The investigators, determined to uncover the truth, delved into the history of the village. They uncovered the dark secrets that were intertwined with the Borley Rectory. The village's history was marred by a sinister cult that had thrived in secrecy, conducting rituals within the rectory's chapel that bound the restless spirits to their torment. The investigators shared their findings with Eleanor and Samuel, who come to view the spirits as victims of the cult's dark machinations, and they believed it was their duty to help them find peace. The investigators, armed with their knowledge and equipment, joined the Willoughbys in the dimly lit chapel. The air was thick with tension as they prepared to face the supernatural forces that had tormented the rectory for generations. As soon as the investigators started chanting incantations, a malevolent wind howled through the ancient structure. The malevolent entities, the nun and the priest, manifested with a ferocity that defied the natural world. Their ghostly forms contorted and twisted as they fought to maintain their hold on the rectory. The room seemed to pulse with supernatural energy, its walls shifting and groaning as if the very foundations of the house were rebelling. The Willoughbys stood firm with the investigators, their voices resolute in the face of the otherworldly maelstrom. With each verse of the incantation, the spectral figures of the nun and the priest grew more agitated. The nun's eyes, once filled with sorrow, now burned with rage, while the priest's malevolent presence radiated an aura of darkness and despair. They wailed and shrieked, their torment echoing through the chapel. The investigators' equipment registered off the charts with fluctuations in the electromagnetic fields, and the temperature dropped to bone-chilling levels. Suddenly a blinding light filled the chapel, and a deafening cry tore through the air. The spectral figures of the nun and the priest contorted and writhed in agony before vanishing into a brilliant burst of ethereal energy. The investigators and the Willoughbys stood in shock and awe, their bodies trembling with the residual energy of the encounter. As the first rays of dawn broke through the chapel's stained glass windows, the realization settled upon them that the haunting of Borley Rectory had come to an end. The house that had been known as the most haunted house in England was now free from its chilling legacy. In the days that followed, the Willoughbys made the difficult decision to leave the rectory behind. The house, though seemingly freed from its malevolent hauntings, bore the scars of its past. The family had faced terrors that would stay with them for the rest of their lives, and they longed for the solace of a life away from the supernatural. As they left the village of Borley, they couldn't help but glance back at the rectory one last time. The grand old mansion stood in quiet solitude, yet Eleanor's complexion paled instantly upon catching sight of a dark figure in one of the chapel's windows.